I can't necessarily comment on a global scale. We're still looking at it in Australia from our perspective, but whilst we're also here for our cybersecurity and we've already got an established team here, it made sense that we would at the very least engage in conversations. It comes down to one single line: do something you're passionate about. Because from that passion, nothing else exists. You can overcome any challenges.
Welcome to the new episode of Storymakers. Today we are being joined by Joseph Villalobos. He is a tech expert and he has almost 30 years of experience in this industry, and he has witnessed the rise of innovation along with the cyber scams. As the CEO, he has always worked to stay ahead of the scammers, but now he is leading Sapher into a new mission of building a cleaner and greener world through renewable energy. In a major move, Sapher has partnered with the Punjab government to develop solar farms, aiming to reshape India's energy needs. Joseph is here to share how he plans to tackle India's energy challenges and to drive a more sustainable future. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joseph. Tell us more about your company and what do you plan to do in India?
It wasn't so much a change of strategy. It was always a diversification strategy that we were looking at, which the fundamental basics is about where we could assist people.
Right.
And not just individuals, but also communities. Now, the main driver for that was actually an opportune conversation that whilst we were discussing cybersecurity, the subject of solar energy came about as one of the challenges in the state of Punjab, and the initiatives that they were putting into place, such as the small solar farms there. Obviously, there's been great big solar farms been put in place by NCR, Adani, and some very large organizations, but they're on a large scale. And so what eventuated was, given our experience in Australia and within our internal resources, who had previously worked on infrastructure projects, including myself, where they've deployed medium-sized solar farms around the globe, in Dubai, in Australia, as well as the US, that it made sense that we would also look at that opportunity and see how we could contribute. So that's where it all came about.
Yeah, that's what we want to understand, that when we talk of Sapher, we think of cybersecurity. So now you coming into solar, how does it align overall? Of course, it is about the betterment of the world, betterment of the future of the world. But how do we align Sapher with both of these, with cybersecurity as well, with solar as well?
Okay, so two aspects on that. One is solar as a renewable source of energy, always aligned with ESG requirements, environmental sustainability, governance, as well as our core values and principles. One of the ideas that I originally had, even when we were addressing cybersecurity, was small remote communities, even within Australia, which could potentially be cut off from mains power grids, etc., and putting in smaller kilowatt versus megawatt solar systems to be able to ensure that they had energy. And so whilst we were looking at those projects in Australia, especially for remote communities, it just made sense that we would venture into the field of solar, given our experience. Now, similar to cybersecurity, we'd performed our due diligence. We've had the necessary knowledge and experience and personnel within our organization who could actually lead those projects. And just like any other company, we're able to ascertain that it was also a financially beneficial diversification strategy for us.
So, of course, when we talk of solar energy, it is about the global sustainability.
Correct.
How do you see it foregoing and changing the world?
I can't necessarily comment on a global scale. What Sapher is doing is we're simply trying to do our little piece in whatever little way. I mean, it's a very large and challenging world, and there's organizations out there who have made it their business to deploy large scale, whether you're talking, in the US, the Middle East, and even here in India.
Yeah.
Okay. But the opportunities we've been looking for is the smaller scale opportunities where there may be only a number of players who can actually fulfill that.
Yeah.
We're not even looking at, for example, rooftop. There's enough companies out there who are constantly deploying rooftop. And my understanding is in some of the Indian cities is that it's mandatory to have a rooftop solar installation.
Right.
So that's not the space and market. The gaps that we've been finding is those smaller scale operations where it's cost prohibitive for some of the smaller companies to actually engage in. And hence why we're investing in those sorts of markets and that scale so that we could assist India in its goal for
500 megawatt
correct by
production.
2030.
Well, but you picking India as the market, what is the core reason? Of course, we understand that you want to target the small scale production, but why India? So far from down under, you are here in India to do business.
Look, we're still looking at it in Australia from our perspective, but whilst we're also here for our cybersecurity and we've already got an established team here, it made sense that we would at the very least engage in conversations. Now, the original plan was for 6 to 12 months down the track, whilst we essentially got our cybersecurity products well and truly entrenched within the Indian market. But with the opportunities presenting itself, we thought, well, it's financially viable. It is readily acceptable by the various agencies, organizations and communities we're currently engaged with.
Right.
We've got personnel here who are already aware and have the necessary knowledge and experience, and we can always fly in our resources to assist with the actual design, etc. And not just that, but also bring in new technologies and new ways, innovative ways to be able to deploy solar technology.
So overall, India is trying that annually they can produce over 500 gigawatt of electricity via solar. And you were speaking about the small scale production. So how do you see both of things aligning together for India to produce so much of power and electricity?
On the large scale, my understanding is that's fed solely into the grid. Right. It's not necessarily a hybrid model at this stage, but in the smaller scale solar farms, like the ones being proposed in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Haryana, there's a slow shift moving towards the hybrid model, which is a combination of direct feed to the grid as well as battery storage, which is then utilized at the peak times of usage, like early evening, late afternoon, so that the main power grid is not basically overburdened and overloaded. So with that move towards that, there's, even with battery storage itself, there's a number of upcoming technologies beyond your standard lithium batteries that we're looking to bring in on the smaller scale so that it's not just greener, but it's also utilizing the best technologies available in the most efficient way.
So it is very much possible that solar can replace lithium batteries in near future?
Absolutely not. What will happen is that they'll always complement each other. You can never rely on solar energy purely as a source of power.
Right.
What will happen though is that with the emerging technologies for battery storage itself, that's where it could get more efficient and lower cost to ensure that there is a continuous power supply, especially during those peak times, and that there is a method of actually storing it and replenishing the availability of energy from batteries.
Right. Well, what challenges do you see here? Of course, you spoke about that there are multiple companies and big brands, big companies are there. So what are the challenges for you to bring this small scale production of solar energy in India?
The main challenges are basically that we don't engage in the current traditional markets that are being addressed by the current, companies deploying solar farms throughout India. So the main challenge is actually finding the niche markets, which for us include things, innovations like panels over canals, or the challenge of innovating so that the optimization of land use occurs. Because one of the things we're trying to prevent is having to utilize, good farming land for produce production, right, and having it taken over by solar panels. It's doable, but that also detracts from, a food source that's produced as a primary production to feed.
So do you think in future there could be some solution in a sort of way that the agricultural land can be used for both purposes?
Absolutely. Look, coexistence is the big question here, right? And it's by utilizing the most up-to-date technology and deployment methodology, as well as more efficient solar panels. And there's some emerging technologies there that would assist in that.
What's the long-term vision of Sapher role? I mean, what do you plan to achieve in energy sector, especially, of course, the renewable energy sector?
Well, the first foremost in terms of our long-term goal is to essentially be able to not just allow those smaller communities or even getting up to the larger towns and rather than just villages,
right?
But to be able to harness as much of that solar energy as a complementary source to the hydro, complementary source to the wind turbines,
right?
As well as the biogas, right? So they're all alternative sources of energy. Our focus is going to be on solar and see and reach out to all of the innovations and have a clear understanding of the latest trends and the innovations being brought into the solar field, and see how we could actually implement it in these sorts of communities. Obviously, if you're able to implement it in a small community, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to scale that so that it supports an entire town or a large town, and then eventually a small city. Now, that would be fantastic, that its reliance on mains electricity it becomes less, and which, as we know, the main sources are coal. Right, coal-fired power stations, nuclear. We already saw what happened in Japan. So It's just utilizing Mother Nature's, Mother Nature's resources that she provides us with the sun, with the wind,
Yes, the
with
time,
water.
as we know that most of the the electric cars or the vehicles that we have on the road, they're using the energy produced by coal. So we hope that that is going to be replaced, and solar energy will be something that all these cars will be using. And with your experience, the vast experience of 30 years as running multiple startups, entrepreneur, what is your advice to the budding, businessmen and the people who want to run their own business and become an entrepreneur? What will be your message about the challenges, the excitement of the business as well?
It comes down to one single line: do something you're passionate about. Because from that passion,
Right.
nothing else exists. You can overcome any challenges, you can overcome any problems that arise, but it's something that keeps you going, and it's straight from the heart.
Right. So this was Joseph Villalobos, and he has his own plans about how to revolutionize the energy sector in India. As he spoke, that there are multiple companies who are providing solar energy, but what he is focusing on the small scale businesses and the homes and the communities to lighten their life with solar energy. Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Storymakers, and we wish you all the good luck in India, Joseph.
Thanks for your time.
Same here.
Thank you.